Okay, I forgot to check my mic earlier, but you all hear me, correct? Okay. Welcome to today's cavern tour. This is going to be a tour in two parts. We will be concluding the tour next week, and that will be the final tour of the season. We will go on a break for a couple of months, and then we will probably be restarting the tours all over again next December. So if you missed any tours this season, they will be coming back around. Zeke 365, the guy who organized these tours 5 years ago, is going to be retiring after this next tour, and will be leaving the game for a while to go on to other projects. So if any of you are ever interested in perhaps taking up the duties of hosting the tours, contact us, and we'll talk about what all it entails. This age, of course, is called Gahreesen. When Yisha included Gahreesen in the Path of the Hand, she chose it as a way of convincing the called that Denis was restrictive and controlling, and went out of their way to prevent the least from rebelling against him. These were her words about Gahreesen in the Rodina Baro cave. Let me tell you the story of King Karath, dare I speak ill of him. One of the great kings, but yet he was the maker of the proud, for it was his system of guilds that served as the foundation of power and corruption. The powerful need control, fortresses and garrisons to guard their power, and soon the guarding is another thing to be proud of. Layers within layers built to preserve their ages and their pride from the weak and least who might attack from without. And yet it is from within that most nations fall, and so the mighty garrisons of Denis now stand vacant. As was Yisha's custom, she took a place that was built for a very specific purpose and only told us what she wanted us to think about it, without a hint of its true purpose or history. She even lied about the guilds of Denis by implying that Karath created the guilds and that they were universally corrupted by power. In the book of quotes from the writings of Urpa that Yisha left in Relto, she attempted to tie this passage to Gahreesen. The laws contrived by the proud are their security and their undoing. Such laws make disobedience a virtue and obedience a sin. Regeltav Urpa, Book 12, Entry 32, Item 134. So what do we really know about Karath? Karath was the youngest of three sons. His parents were King Rakuth and his wife Hisha. He was raised by his mother to follow the teachings of a man named Gish, who was a prophet that did not are you hearing me now? Okay, what was the last thing you heard? Okay, so we lost sound at when I was beginning to talk about who Karath was. Okay, I'll start over from that paragraph. Karath was the youngest of three sons. His parents were King Rakuth and his wife Hisha. He was raised by his mother to follow the teachings of a man named Gish, who was a prophet that did not believe King Alcindar was the great king predicted by Urba. Because of the doctrine of Gish, and because he'd watched his father argue with his advisors about the perceived need to cut off ties with outsiders, Karath decided at an early age that the monarchy was no longer the correct way to govern Denis. This wouldn't have mattered since, at the time, he was not the heir to the throne. He had at least two older brothers. But later events changed that. When Rakuth was on his deathbed, he saw something that convinced him that Karath should be the heir of the throne rather than the older brothers. Thus, King Karath was coronated as king, and immediately after his coronation, he proposed that the monarchy should be suspended until the coming of the true great king. Of course, what he carefully did not mention while he was talking his head off was that if there was no monarchy, how would people recognize when the great king had come? Karath didn't actually accomplish very much during his time on the throne. He spent most of it convincing the Denis people to change the way they had been ruled for thousands of years, which was a much harder task than you might think. The Denis were a very conservative people, and such a major change in their lives was met with considerable resistance. That Karath was able to accomplish the task within his own reign was nearly miraculous. Karath carefully crafted his arguments as a benefit for the guilds more than anything else. After all, he argued, Denis is the guilds. Let us be protected by their fortress and be ruled by their wisdom. Because of that, Karath was considered great, so much so that the Arch of the Great King was renamed as the Arch of Karath after his death. The honor was not for what he accomplished as a ruler, but because he was able to overturn and reinvent the entire government of the empire within his own lifetime. Was the council system he set up as corrupt as Yesha portrayed? Absolutely not. Or at least it was no more corrupt than any government created by human beings, and a lot less than many. Government corruption often arises from an imagined need for the control of the citizens of a country, or because a bureaucracy or an individual government employee wishes to gather wealth or power. The guilds were integrated with every aspect of Denis life, and in a very real sense, the guilds were Denis. So what need would they have to gather more power or wealth? They already possessed all that could be had. Let's talk about the age. Gahreesen is a private age that was commissioned by and belonged to the Guild of Maintainers. The Guild of Maintainers were a law enforcement agency for the ages outside of the Denis Caverns. Maintainers approved newly written ages, made regular inspections of ages to ensure their proper upkeep, and destroyed flawed linking books. They were also responsible for Denis relations with non-Denis people, whom they called Arotanti, which means outsiders. They worked cooperatively with the Guild of Riders and with the City Guard, the law enforcement organization that was responsible for policing the Denis Caverns, regulating traffic, and protecting the king. A modern analogy would be to think of the City Guard as the urban police force and the maintainers as the sheriff's department. Around 8500 on the Denis calendar, The maintainers created a small but elite division that was given the job of research and testing of technological advancements. It was for that division that Gahreesen was written. The maintainers who were headquartered here were highly trained both physically and mentally. Because of the sensitive nature of their work, operational security was considered crucial. The Age was conceived as a layered fortress that was as close to impossible to breach as they could make it. After the buildings were constructed and necessary linking books were written, the two buildings in this age were made to spin by means of water power flowing underneath them and constantly rotate to prevent any new unwanted books from being written here. Gahreesen also served a very different purpose. The larger of the two fortress buildings had a maximum security prison built at its highest historic point, which was accessed by a completely separate set of linking books than the rest of the Age. It was impossible to get from the lower parts of the building to the prison and vice versa unless you jumped off the roof. And if you did, it was a very long way down. Not long before the fall of Denis, the smaller of the two buildings was opened to the public on a restricted basis. Under guard, normal people of the higher classes were allowed into the Age to be issued key devices. They were still distributing them when the fall of Denis occurred. The name of this age, Gahreesen, is derived from three Denis words. Garo means great or mighty, Aria means to protect, and Senaren means building or structure. Thus, Gahreesen means a great protective structure, or in other words, a fortress. As this is somewhat close in meaning and sound to the English word garrison, the DRC Yisha and some explorers have used garrison when writing or speaking about the Age. Victor Laxman was the person in charge of restoring Gahreesen with assistance from Chief Structural Engineer Michael Ingberg. And it was Laxman who discovered the existence of key devices and who eventually set them up so that we could use them. Restoration engineer Michael Simpson was Laxman's assistant for the project and studied the Age over the course of several visits. He wrote his first impressions of Gahreesen in a notebook with entries made between November 12th of 2001 and June 4th of 2002. His first notebook entry had this to say, "Okay, one thing seems immediately obvious. This place was built for security. No one could write a link anywhere in this place or the next. It was obviously a maintainer facility of some kind, and it doesn't seem that it was for general guild members. By that, I mean it was limited to at least the higher-ranking members. As to how they got the first link written here, I don't know, probably while it was under construction. It does seem pretty obvious that it's not going to happen again unless something major happens to this place. I should say that Kodama has some theories about the Age that have held up so far. May have been a special forces of a sort for the maintainers. Started later, mid-8000s. Became somewhat of a research and development arm for the Maintainers Guild. I don't know, worth mentioning though. There are quite a few mentions of such groups in other docs Kodama has found, or at least seen. Okay, I'm going to pause for a moment. Does anyone have any questions about anything I've spoken about, of it up to this point? Apparently, Keret's older brothers were both cool with the notion and supported his coronation. Okay, when Keret abdicated and turned over control of Denis, it was to a council made up of members of the major guilds. At first, there were 5 members of, that were appointed to be on the council. But later, that number was expanded to include membership from all 18 of the major Denis guilds. At that point, the council, the original 5 positions that were on the council were changed, and those people, instead of being councilmen, became known as great lords. Their job was not to pass laws or propose laws. Instead, they served as tiebreakers in the case the regular council had a disagreement. But effectively, from the day that King Karaf abdicated, the guilds were ruling Denis on as a city council. Gahreesen was controlled and manned by the Guild of Maintainers. If you look around this room, the symbol that you see all around is the Maintainers logo. It's made up of an eye overlooking a linking book. Okay. Simpson, when you first link to Gahreesen, you arrive in this room, which is open to the sky. If you go into first-person view and look up, you'll be able to see the clouds rotating above us. The arrival point is in the exact center of the room and is marked by a plate on the floor bearing the symbol of the Guild of Maintainers. In the wall opposite from where I'm standing, there is a second-story opening overlooking the room, which is nicknamed the Sniper's Window because of a phrase in Simpson's notes. It allowed maintainer guards to watch arriving visitors. The center, the room, of course, has one armored door which leads into the building interior. By the way, the dividing line that you see in the wall, where all the maintainers' symbols are, is the ceiling of the first floor and the beginning of the second floor. Yes, and we will be going there later. You do that, though, when you first explore this age. You climb up there, and you just may not have noticed it. Okay, if there's no other questions, we're going to move into the next room and stop there. You're going to want to stand in front of me so that when I tell you directions, they'll mean something to you. This room was dubbed the waiting room by Simpson. His notes read, "So, visitors are escorted into this little waiting room. There's a window on one side that looks almost like a ticket window. Maybe turn-in windows or goods that aren't allowed. Maybe books. I'm sure they didn't want books in here. Yeah, looks like mainly for books. There is another ticket window on the other side, although this one looks different. I'm pretty sure those are beetle cages on the other side. Beetles that sought out ink. Somebody was just telling me that there are all kinds of references to them in other documents. You don't make it past this room with a book. As well, the doors never seem to open at the same time. So even if you somehow make it out of the entrance room, you're still not going to make it past these mammoth doors out of the waiting area. And that's exactly how it works. After leaving the arrival room, visitors entered this reception room where they were directed to the window which is on your left. There, they were inspected by guards who had small cages with scarab beetles in them. The beetles could smell the ink used in linking books and would become agitated if they did. Visitors with linking books then had to turn them in at the right-hand window for storage. Once they were cleared, the visitors were allowed into the corridor outside this room to continue. If you look through the open door, you will notice that there is a door across the hall. That is the down elevator. The up elevator is farther along the corridor. Each elevator only goes one way, and that's for added security. You'll notice that the doors are heavy and extremely thick. They operate via electric motors and have sensors built into them. The sensors detect your key device and determine the program's security level of the key device. If the key device is of a level authorized to access the room or corridor beyond the door opens. If the key device does not have sufficient privileges, the sensor flashes but does not open the door. Key devices given to explorers have a high enough security clearance to open all of the doors on the first floor, but can only open the corridor doors on the second floor. Strangely enough, your key devices will open any of the doors in Gahreesen 2, the other building, which evidently had tougher security than Gahreesen 1. Why that would be has never been explained. So let's go ahead and walk out into the corridor, and then we're going to move along the corridor to the right until we get to the first room. Okay, that looks like that's everyone. This is the locker room where the guards stored the confiscated linking books. If you look at the cages that line this room, most of them are filled with books that were confiscated on the last day that this fortress was in operation, just before the fall of Denis. Visitors were never allowed in here, and the room still holds a rather large collection of confiscated books. Why they had so many books to collect was a bit of a mystery to everyone until Dr. Watson, Richard Watson, I should say, explained it in an open letter to explorers. It seemed that the Denis, who traveled throughout various ages, always carried an emergency linking book with them. In case they got into trouble and needed a quick exit, they could touch the panel on the book they were carrying and go to a predetermined place of safety. That may have been a private age that they owned. It may have been a public age that they happen to have a copy of, but generally speaking, they use them the way that we use our Relto books now. However, unlike the Relto books, when they used their linking books, the book would remain behind because of limitations in the Denis art of writing. So when once they had used their book, it was lost to them unless they were able to go back and find it wherever it was when they linked out. Back in his day, Atris also carried a linking book to Mist Island everywhere when he was exploring the ages that he wrote for exactly that same reason. Something else that you'll find in here, in 3 of the lockers, are maintainers markers. Those are the glowing yellow discs that you see in various ages. Those were placed there once an age had been approved by the Guild of Maintainers as being safe for use. However, they did have another function. Somewhere in this, there should be, somewhere around here, there should be a maintainer's mark that has been fully assembled. If you look over to your left, over in the corner, you will see a number of metal spikes standing up, and I believe there's one that's fallen down, which has a marker attached to it. Those spikes were driven into the ground of an approved age, and then the activated marker was placed atop it. You'll also see a number of the marker caps in the locker next to those spikes. The caps contain the valuable components, which is why most of them are inside of lockers. An explorer named Keith Lord, who incorporated a maintainer's mark into one of his fan ages, report that the markers also serve the same function as the Great Zero in that they form the point of origin for the Denis cylindrical coordinate system. He reports that markers that are lit are capable of being used for navigation, markers that are flickering give garbled readings, and markers that are dark are dead and you do not get a coordinate reading from them. Okay, any questions about this room? Nothing's ever really been said about writing a linking book per se. We do know that sometimes descriptive books could be written in a matter of weeks or months if they were trying to hurry it along. Descriptive books had a special language that was used in writing them that incorporated what were called Gahreesen, or great words. Writing an age is akin to writing a program for a computer, and the Gahreesen served as macros. What they did is that they were certain words that you could use as shortcuts to get a desired effect. In other words, if you wanted rocks scattered around an age, there was a word that would do that for you without you having to write the position of every single rock. There was the same thing if you wanted certain types of plants in an age. You could write those in using the Gahreesen, and that saved them a great deal of time when they were trying to create a new age. Linking books are slightly different. Once a descriptive book was written, it would reach out throughout space and time and different dimensions until it found a world which, or a place on a world, which closely matched the description that had been written in the book. Once it had locked on to that, it would then create, sure, it would then create the linking panel, and that would become active, giving you your link to that world. Then, once you had linked into that world, you could find a spot in it where you wanted to have another linking point, and by sitting down in that spot and writing a general description of it, which is much shorter than the original descriptive book, you could create a link to that spot. And that, by the way, is why the buildings here spin. Because in order to write a linking book, you have to be motionless in relationship to your surroundings. Once they started these buildings spinning, it became impossible to write linking books here. So that's why we don't know, since no one's ever actually written anything about that, we just don't know if it took hours or days or what to write a linking book. We do know that the Book of Earth, which is the original descriptive book for the Denis Cavern, was written in approximately 2 years by Reneref. Hummingbird, which lock gate are you talking about? If you're talking about the lockers themselves, that's exactly what they are. Those are secure lockers for holding confiscated linking books as well as the maintainer's markers. If you, over to your right, at the end of the room, by the way, is the window out into the waiting room where the books would have to be turned in to the guards. Okay, if that's it for questions here, then we're going to go ahead and move into the next room through the connecting door. Ural, that is right. The Denis didn't create worlds. When they wrote a linking book, uh, the magic, for lack of a better word, of the book would search throughout space-time and throughout other dimensions across the multiverse in order to find an existing world which closely matched what had been written in the book, and it would tie itself to that, and that's how the link and forming a link to it. However, that's one of those subjects which posed a problem throughout the history of the Denis, and reaching back to the Rhone people that they sprang from before they moved to Earth. There was always at least a few people who believed that they were creating new worlds when they wrote descriptive books, not just tying into them. And that caused an awful lot of problem throughout the entire history of Denis. And of course, it caused an awful lot of problems because Gin, who was the father of Atris, also believed that he was a god who was creating worlds when he wrote a descriptive book. This is the only room that visitors to the age were permitted to enter. Once they had been cleared through the waiting room, they would come down the corridor to the door to this room. They would come in, place their hand in the linking book or the key dispenser, and be issued their key. At that point, a guard would come from the locker room that we were just in with their belongings, give them to them, and they were expected to immediately use the Nexus book that I'm standing next to. They were not permitted to stay here any longer than it took them to get their key device and to be given their possessions back. The books that remained in that room were books that were collected on the day of the fall of Denis. And at that point, people had a lot more trouble with other things to worry about than collecting their merchandise from that room. Key devices were originally only issued to members of the Guild of Maintainers, according to some sources. However, key devices were given their name by Victor Laxman, the person who discovered them. The Denis number 3 was written on the back of the first key device he found, and to him, it looked like the number looked like the letters K and I. Simpson thought that the locker room was set up to impress visitors, but that's not true. The contents of that room were considered too sensitive for maintainers to have allowed anyone else inside, even for a peek. Across from this room, outside and the door, through the door to the corridor, is the elevator that leads up to the roof. That elevator and the one by the waiting room, which comes down from the roof, only have two stops, this floor and the roof. There is a second floor of this building, but the elevator never stopped there. Okay, we're going to walk out the door to the corridor. We're going to make a right turn, and we're going to go to the next room in line here. Simpson calls this the warehouse. When the DRC originally found this room, here's the notes that he made on it. Quite a bit of goodies in here, all of which I'm sure most visitors never saw. Pretty bad cave-in from the floor above, although Ingberg says structurally the place seems all right. He's doing a more detailed inspection later. Looks like most of these crates are filled with key maintenance type equipment, as well as a variety of spare parts, etc. I don't know. Laxman will have to give this place a good inspection. I'm sure he'll love going through it all. Beyond me, I know that. This building, of course, is empty, or this room is empty now, but it would have contained an awful lot of valuable and sensitive equipment, which the DRC apparently moved away from the age, and possibly maybe storing in Token 1 back on Accra Island. And I was about to say something, and it entered my head, and it flew right out the other side, and I don't know what I was going to say. Anyway, any questions about anything I've spoken about up to this point? What can they say when you get to be 60? They say that your memory is the first thing to go. I don't remember what the second thing is that they say. There's not an awful lot I can do about that. We'll just have to deal with it. Anyway, if we do not have... yeah, actually, I'm not too far away from both. I have an air conditioner behind me. Okay, anyway, since there don't seem to be any questions, we're going to walk back out into the corridor and along the hall to the next room. Okay. Simpson's note about this room is beetle cages. Convenient cave-in. Not sure how one is supposed to get to in the beetle cages without it. No idea how they did it. Link maybe. Regardless, pretty positive the cages were for beetles. Symbols on the front, and quite a bit of remnants of in some of the dirtier cages. We'll have to clean those up. Wonder when they all died. Speaking of access, another question. How'd they get to the second floor? Elevators skip the middle floor. More security, I suppose. And Simpson was correct. This is a scarab beetle cage room. Currently, it can only be reached through the crevice torn in the corridor wall, but originally, there was a doorway from this room into the warehouse. That's now blocked by rubble from the collapsed section of ceiling. Simpson apparently did not climb over the rubble and find that door. When the DRC first found this room, there were remains of dead beetles in the cages. Victor Laxman had them cleaned out. There is a persistent myth floating around among explorers that the scarab beetles used for making linking book ink were native to Gahreesen. However, there is a problem with that idea. They're known to have been an ingredient in the ink used in linking books pretty much since day one. And if the beetles came from this age, how did the Rone or Denis make the ink before 8500 when the age was written? It is known that Gien visited Gahreesen and found surviving beetles here. When he wrote Riven, he included those beetles in his description so that he'd have them for making ink there. The beetles can also be found in a place called the Ink Age, which was one of several ages written as a source of materials for the Guild of Fine Artists. My best guess is that the beetles and the trees that were used in making books were all native to Gardernay and were written into other ages for the same reason that Gien wrote them into Riven. They knew that Gardernay was doomed, so making those resources available elsewhere would just be common sense. However, on Gahreesen, it's probably just a case of some of the beetles escaping after they brought them in to use in detecting linking books. And apparently they liked the environment and flourished here. As I mentioned before, their importance to the maintainers here lay in the fact that the beetles, since the ink was made of their own bodies, could smell the ink used for the linking books and reacted strongly to it. Behind me is the window where a guard would stand with the small cage of the beetles to check incoming visitors for books. If detected, the visitor would then be escorted across to the other side of the room to the locker room window to turn them in. From here, we're going to be moving up to the second floor, and we're going to want to wait for Murphak to move Mirobot up there, and then we'll link to the bot. Or he's just going to warp us up here. That works too. The question was asked earlier if we could ever go up to the room where the sniper's window is, and here's the answer. I'm standing right next to the window now. Hummingbird, just PMW to Mirobot or Find Larry, and both will get you up here. Simpson's notes about this room begin with this. Destruction was a little more substantial than I thought. Looks like it tore out a section of the outer wall even. I'm going to get out of here until Ingberg can come back again. Then he continues, been a few days, but I'm back. I'm no expert, so I guess I'll have to trust Ingberg. But he says this whole thing is one of the most solid, heavy pieces of construction he's ever seen. It's safe, he assures me. If I die here, and someone retrieves this recording, please sue him for me. Second floor looks similar to the first. Outer hall and a number of rooms. Have to remember that very few people probably ever walk these halls. There is no access via elevators, stairs, anything to get here. I assume it had to be done via a linking book, which is probably somewhere in the city. I suppose there could only be a way to stop those elevators on the middle. I suppose there could be a way to stop those elevators on the middle floor, but I doubt it. Regardless, this floor was extremely secure. Book access only, I'm guessing. Simpson's note about the elevators not having a stop on the second floor is confirmed. Walking around this corridor, on this level, there are no doors for the elevators anywhere. Access to the second floor would have been through linking books written before they began rotating the building, and the linking would have only worked by timing the moment when a person touched the book to get here. It's suspected that the books would have been kept in a high-security section of the Maintainers Guild Hall in the Denis City. Okay, any questions about anything up to this point? The rule for linking is that you can link with anything you can carry. This is means, and you in order to use a linking book, living tissue had to touch it, although you still could have gloves on or something along that line. Hummingbird, I'll be talking about that in a moment. And that gets us into the subject of how the Denis moved cargo around from age to age. If living tissue had to touch a living, or a living creature had to touch a linking book and could only carry whatever it was that it, or could only take with it whatever it could carry, then that leads to the question of how do you move bulk cargo? And the answer to that is pack animals. A handler could touch a linking book to a pack animal, and that animal would link with whatever it was carrying, however that load might have been. That means if you had a large load, you used a larger animal. Now, there is also a theory that that is why the Barrow were kept by the Denis Empire. And that's a mystery that's never been explained. There may be further notes about them, but they haven't been released. We do know that the average person in the Denis Empire and most of its elites had absolutely no knowledge whatsoever of the existence of the Barrow. Apparently, it was a very closely guarded secret only a few knew. And to put it bluntly, the majority of the Denis people would have been completely and utterly horrified and outraged if they had known about them, because the Denis Empire very definitely had some strict laws that were anti-slavery. So the idea that there was an intelligent race which was bound to serve the Denis Empire against their will would have horrified them. But it is suspected that the reason that the Barrow were kept bound to the empire was because of their approach to linking. They had a completely different art than the Denis had, and that surpassed many of the Denis limitations. For instance, we know that a baro could reach out and touch something and link with it. And apparently it didn't matter how big that object was. So it's suspected that the baro may have been used as a sort of superior pack animal by the people who knew about them. However, that's a theory, and there's nothing so far that has been released by the DRC that would confirm it. As a matter of fact, there's even some proof that in the way they wrote things, that the DRC did not know about the baro until the baro made themselves known during what was called the Baro War. Any other questions? No. The Baro are an intelligent Arotanti species. In other words, they are a people that were discovered on when an age book was written, or at least that seems to be what the case is. We know that the Baro came from an age that was called the Spiral Age. It was one of the books that the DRC knew about and had planned to release at one point. However, there is no evidence that they knew that there was an intelligent species there, or I should say a living intelligent species. They had found some evidence of an inhabitation there, but apparently they had not met the Baro themselves because the Baro kept themselves secret. How the Baro became bound to the empire in the first place is another one of those things that there's absolutely nothing written about, so we have no idea how it happened. The Baro, as an intelligent people, had developed their ability to link as a technology. And we know that it was done by means of specific designs in their own language, just like the Denis had the Garo Hevti. And the Baro were not born with the ability to link. They gained it during a rite of ascension to adulthood, in which they were tattooed with marks that allowed them to link. Okay, if that's there are no more questions, we'll go ahead and move outside this room into the corridor, and we will stop there. The reason why we're stopping here is just so that I can point out one of the secrets of this building. Looking at this crack which formed in the wall when the building was damaged, you will see what looks like a wall moving past it, but that's an illusion. This building is set in a hole in the ground, And what you're seeing is the building itself is moving, and the wall you're seeing through it is what is holding still. The building is being rotated by water power. We're in a river valley, and water is being directed underneath the building against a kind of stone blades built into the base of it, and that water pressure is moving us sort of like a water mill would on a river. Okay, let's go ahead and move to your left through the door and stop in the next section of corridor. The door that you see in this corridor is a higher security level than the doors, than the rest of the doors, the ones that actually go from one section to another are. And when you walk past them by yourself, you will notice that they will flash twice in a green color instead of the light blue that the corridor doors flash. That indicates a higher security, and because our key devices are not authorized to pass them, they do not open. On the other side of that door, Simpson says there was probably a guard lounge. Next to the observation room, at least that's what I assume it was, is what looks like a guard lounge. Looks like they stayed here for long amounts of times. There are beds in here as well as couches. I assume these guys manned the window/observation post while the visitors were coming in. There are since this building is shaped like a pentagon and has 5 distinct sections, which means that on each floor there were usually one room per section. Other than the guard lounge, Simpson noted that some of the other rooms were lockers, similar to the ones downstairs that they kept linking books in, and which were probably equipment for the maintainer station here. And finally, we had what he called the gear room, which is where we're going now. Simpson's notes for this room say, "Now I see why this floor was so secure. Looks like the whole power structure for this building is here. Amazing construction. The entire building looks to have been powered by some underground water source that caused it to turn. They implemented a gear that would grab onto teeth in the ground outside and provide them with a power source as well. Talk about killing two giant birds with one stone. Pretty amazing. Power looks somewhat complicated. Seems as though there were at least occasions that power was turned off, as there are obviously controls to do that and then start it again. I'm heading to the top. As Simpson noted, the second floor of this building is completely forbidden to visitors, and even not all of the maintainers could get to it. Simpson thought that the only way that there was to get here was by means of a linking book used in conjunction with precise timing. The rooms are also restricted. This is the room that holds the generator for the building, as well as electrical switches. The building is turned by water flowing through a tunnel underneath it. The gigantic gear that I'm facing is connected to a gigantic generator, and when it's set in the up position, it engages with teeth that are projecting from the socket that this building is set in. Thus, the movement of the building by means of water power turns the gear, which in turn turns the generator. To provide maintenance for the generator, such as lubrication or to repair any damage it might sustain over time, the generator could be turned off, which would kill all of the electricity in the building. So they had another generator over to my right and to your left. This is operated by the pressure plate that I'm standing on now, and it would allow just enough electricity for the power to be turned back on and the generator to be engaged with the wall of the socket. One man could operate this emergency generator while other men activated the main generator. Okay, and before we go up to the surface, any questions at all about this area? Basically, because of Simpson's notes, we know that he says so quite openly that these places are probably water powered, and that was one of the things I had written. I had read from his notes earlier. J. Maynard, in this particular case, they didn't have a way of exiting the building in a hurry. The elevator would only take one person at a time to the surface. However, they would have had linking books up here with which they could exit the building, and the same was probably true of the maintainers down below. They would have had a way of getting out in a hurry. If nothing else, they always had the Nexus book that was in the linking book room. Not to mention the fact that the maintainers, of course, had an entire locker room full of emergency linking books that they could have borrowed in if something had happened. Okay, try telling PMing the letter G and the numbers 34 to Mirobot now, and we'll see if that works for us. It should. Again, that's G34. Just type that and press enter. Okay. Michael Simpson's notes about this place were, wow, I thought this building was big. The main portion is absolutely giant, and rotating too, of course. I'm overcome with the amount of work put into this place just for security. It's everywhere. Almost comical picturing government officials walking along the same paths I am. Amazing. To get to the other side, it looks like one had to walk across the bridge to the rock pinnacle. The first place since we've arrived that we're able to save a link. And it's not big. And there's a massive structure facing you if you did. Pretty funny to try and picture an army invading, all of them bunched up on this stone waiting for these bridges to rotate. What the? My gosh. The creatures. These things are something out of a horror movie. I've been up here for a little while and I didn't see them often, but when I do, they're scaring me to death. I'm beginning to understand the fences and structures a little better. Perhaps some of them were designed to keep creatures out more than to keep visitors in. Don't hang out in these woods unless you have a big gun. Another bridge to reach the main portion of this place, more security. I will say that the platform between the bridges seems to have been eroded. At one time, crossing the bridges was probably a security feature to ensure manageable groups would approach the larger building one at a time, but I would wager it was still a lot easier than it is now. The erosion to the platform to the bridges has made it a little rougher. I suppose the maintainers would like it even more in its current condition. What you'll notice on this one, on the roof of this building, is that there are layers of defense which are all pointed outward. This leads me to believe that the Denis were very worried about the local wildlife. You'll notice that the towers have what look like possibly firing slits, spikes, and if you look, the reason I brought you out on this bridge is that if you look over the sides, you'll notice what look like wires attached to spikes running along the outside of the building. I suspect that that's electric wire and that to form a kind of electrified fence, since this building is closer to the mainland and is actually connected. There is between this building and the walls of the canyon that we're in, there is a kind of dry moat that the Denis carved into the rock. And then the electrified fence would have been the second line of defense. The creatures that Simpson mentioned are apparently very rare and may have only just been passing through the area when Simpson got a look at them. No explorer has ever seen one, although there are reports of some people occasionally hearing them. I've got records of some of their recordings of some of their calls, and I'm going to try to play those for you, which is why you need to be definitely be in voice range. Whether or not this is going to work very well, I couldn't tell you, but we'll at least give it a shot. By the way, you'll notice that the central well of the building that goes down to where we first linked in is also protected, which means that it's possible that at least some of the danger seems to have come from creatures flying in the air. Okay, here goes. So you can try to imagine a creature that can make those kinds of noise being what Simpson ran into. Okay, the next place that we're going to go is the pinnacle where oh, excuse me, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. The second building has is shaped like a hexagon rather than a pentagon, and there are six bridges that extend out from it. Those bridges are drawbridges. They can actually be pulled back inside the base of the building until only a very small part of them is sticking out. However, the controls for those seem to be broken, and we are completely unable to do that. However, I do have a photograph on my website on the Gahreesen 2 page, which shows the building when the DRC first ran into it, and those drawbridges were pulled back in. Uh, there's plenty of birds and insects around here. Unfortunately, none of them are identified in any of the documentation that I've been able to access. Okay, the next place that we're going to go to is going to be the second pinnacle that can be reached by jumping off the bridge here. However, we're not actually going to jump there. We're going to go ahead and have Murphak link us to it. Okay. This is a second rock pillar, right, or third, depending on how you're counting, which is on the opposite side of Gahreesen 1 from the pillar that we use to get to the second building. And this is where the maintainer's mark for this age was set into the ground. This one is dead, so it never worked. However, or I should say it hasn't worked since it's been rediscovered. If you look on the sides of this pillar, though, this pillar is set in the dry moat that I was talking about between the mainland and Gahreesen 1. So you should be able to see the cut in the rock that was put to try and separate it from the creatures that were on the mainland. There is a spiral path which goes down along the rock and ends on a large stone. Traces of linking have been detected on that stone, so we suspect that it would have had either a linking book or perhaps a borrowed stone resting on it at one point. However, we don't know where the link was to, so we don't know what it was intended for. Once you jump down here from the rotating platform on Gahreesen 1, which is possible if you time it right, there's no way to get back, so the only way off this rock was to link back to Relta. That concludes today's tour. We will be continuing the tour next weekend, and we will be going to Gahreesen 2, which is the building in the center of the age. However, we're going to try and do something special for you before we finish, so you'll want to stick around. Again, the tours will continue next weekend, 2200 key time on Friday, and again at 1300 on Saturday. If you have any other questions about anything around us at this point, go ahead and ask them. That'll give Murphac time to set up his effects. For those of you who are new to the tours, this is fairly representative of what most of them are like. We try to take you to places that you've never been before. We try to tell you things that you've never heard of or would have suspected about the various places in the game. And we also tell you all the things that you may not have taken the time to find out for yourself. Hopefully you had fun doing this and you'll rejoin us next tour season. Again, we're kind of expecting that because we always try to take at least a 2-month break between tour seasons. So we're thinking that we'll probably start that up in December, although that hasn't been finalized yet. That also applies to anyone who may have missed any tours this season. There will be a next season, so you will have a chance to catch the ones that you missed. Yes, they are. What we're doing with those pillars is that Murphac is going to try and use them to set up various places around the age or the outside here that we can't reach normally, so that you can get a chance to see things from different angles and take some unusual pictures. The bots usually have what's called a command for what's called an on-lake effect, where we would import a solid surface from another age in order for you to run around freely. However, that's not possible here. The way the models for the game are set up, they're inside of a kind of virtual space where there is an actual set distance in between the various models. And this one is too far away from any other model for us to bring in a solid surface from them. So that's just one of the limitations of this particular, of Gahreesen in particular. Yeah, occasionally you'll hear gray hats say, "I can't do that because it's too far away," and he means that quite literally. Wait a moment and he'll turn the pillars invisible so that we get a good view around us. The ones on the side are there to keep you from falling off.